One of the best things that has helped me with my ADHD is I was sort of always like some of my friends say I'm an amazing yes woman. They're like, you just say like you'll always do it. You'll always do it. And when I really started taking my ADHD seriously, I did what I called a life audit. And I just started tracking how many nights in a row have I done something. And I live in Brooklyn. It's very easy to do something every night of the week. And there was a point when for 17 days straight, I had done one or two or three things every day beyond work and working out and all of the things that we should, try and do on a daily basis. And I was completely burnt out and I tracked it. And it took me 4 days to feel recovered enough to do stuff again. And then I started tracking, well, what if on like the 10th day, I always mark off a day off?
Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, today I'm talking with Danielle Elliot, a health and science journalist, documentarian, and host of Climbing the Walls, an investigative podcast from understood.org, digging into the surge in ADHD diagnoses among women, especially since the pandemic. If that sounds familiar, it's because I did a number of ads for her show a few months back, and I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that fact, since while I'm not getting paid for this episode, I have done work with Understood before, and probably will be promoting their stuff again in the future, but this one is just something that was a fun conversation to have with Danielle. In our conversation today, we cover a lot of ground, from debunking the idea that no one knew women could have ADHD until recently, to how social media has reshaped the conversation, to why research on hormones and ADHD is still way behind. We also get into the everyday realities of living with ADHD, the default mode network, and why we need far more research into how ADHD shows up in women. It's a mix of science, lived experience, and the kind of practical reflection that can help you rethink how ADHD fits into your life. If you'd like to follow along on the show notes page, you can find that at hackingYourADHD.com/241. All right, keep on listening to find out what we've been getting wrong about women and ADHD.
Especially with you saying that the majority of your guests tend to be women because of that, that's the population of who's late diagnosed. I've noticed this trend, and I didn't talk about it in the show, but I've noticed this trend of stories that kind of exclusively feature men who were diagnosed as kids who are now saying, in my 30s or 40s, I don't need the medication anymore. I don't think ADHD is what I was taught that it is. And to me, it's sort of after 20 years of treatment, you might have a handle on your ADHD such that it doesn't feel the same. And I'm just curious, like, if you've seen any sort of trend like that, or if you hear it. Yeah.
So, I just turned 40 like a month ago, and
Oh, me too. When was your birthday?
April 17th.
Oh, it's April 22nd, and I just turned 40. So we're like very close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny with ADHD is this developmental disorder, and by the time I'm 40, maybe I'm kind of done cooking on a lot of things, and either I'm set in my ways on things that will help me, or I'm really struggling with things I'm never going to change, or at least I need to put a lot more effort into changing.
Right, which might not happen. Yeah.
But it is one of those things where whenever I get someone sends me something about ADHD being a superpower, I go, how many people on that list that calling it a superpower are white men? And it's like 90%.
Yeah. It's either, I've noticed that it's white men or it's, like people who, because I would say like I grew up in a house where it was very stigmatized, and like the idea that a kid might have a neurodevelopmental difference that wasn't even terminology I really knew until a few years ago. And when I started using the term superpower to talk to my mom about it, she was so much more receptive, and she definitely is undiagnosed. Like, there's no question. But when it was, you have this extra strength, not. So I see it working with I see people who are using it if they typically grew up in a house with stigma about it. And it's like a way for them to say that stigma doesn't apply to me or something, but yeah. But anyway,
yeah.
I'm
I grew up with, I wasn't diagnosed till I was in my early 20s, but as a kid, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And so my entire life I've been told oh, you just have different brain wiring. And so that's kind of stuck with me, even though I still have like so much to unpack with ADHD.
Yeah.
But it is definitely something where it's like, oh yeah, there are people that like they that label is really scary to them.
It's really scary to them. Yeah, yeah, and my parents didn't wanna hear there was something wrong with their kids, you know? My dad still calls it that ADHD stuff, you know?
Mhm.
We don't even have conversations about it, but, anyway, I'm sidebarring us. We can get started however you
Well,
would like. Yeah.
I think this is a great way to get started.
Yeah, I
On
think
like people
so
are because
too.
I mean, it is one. It's that's the conversation I often like having with people. Is like how like when you view this as a superpower, is that something that's resonate with your life? I know a lot of women doesn't because they're on the unsupported side of things. Because when you have ADHD and you have supports, yeah, it can feel like, oh, I can do anything. I can get work done, and
Mhm.
I'm not doing my laundry. Or I had a friend that was like, oh yeah, this is like I don't worry about meals. My wife makes me lunch. I'm like, yeah, that's a huge accommodation for you.
Yeah. It's a huge accommodation, and in the show, we talk about that a lot in episode 2, but, like, when we talk about gender roles, I'm also like a thing we don't talk about is the number of accommodations that just naturally occur for a lot of men, not for all men,
Mm.
but for a lot of men in heterosexual relationships, there's a lot of accommodations that come with adult life that sort of aren't even necessarily noticed as accommodations. That women are almost like expected to be providing those accommodations.
Yeah.
So for women with ADHD, it's compounding the issues. Um, yeah, we can get into all that. I love talking about that
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I think yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it is one of those things where it's like, oh my God, if you like yeah, I make most of the meals in my house and it's like, yeah, that is
Mhm.
a lot of work to plan, to go to the grocery store, to make sure you have the food, then do the work of making the food. Like that's a lot of
Mhm.
work. And it's often discounted as like, I'm like, if I'm doing that and this and this and this, it's like, that's gonna make ADHD so much harder.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's a thing you don't enjoy. Like if you enjoy cooking, it might not feel like it because, any of us with ADHD, if there's something we enjoy, it doesn't feel like a
Mhm.
chore, right? But um
Yeah, I realized
yeah.
the
Yeah.
real thing with cooking for me is then the like cleanup afterwards where I'm like, oh, I gotta like I'm like, I
That's
don't
the
mind the cooking, but then I'm like, oh, I have all these pans now. Ugh.
exactly. And I'm like, who's supposed to do this? And yeah, it's so funny. Even like growing up, my sister's a phenomenal cook, but I would complain almost every holiday because it was like, well, whoever cooked, the other person should clean. And I was like, but I never said I enjoy cleaning. And she's cooking because she enjoys it. So like there was always this yeah, and this little bit of a battle going on. Um that has nothing to do with ADHD, but that
Yeah,
was just me not wanting to cook or clean, you know? And
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's a valid point too, and I think it's also like when you have the undiagnosed people with ADHD dealing with this kind of stuff, it's like, why is this so hard?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Uh, Even though it's just like, yes, it's just washing some dishes. It's like, yeah, but it's so boring.
It's so tedious and it's so boring. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to have like a podcast I'm listening to and like and it's one of those things where I've like working on ADHD things, I started like, okay, how long does this actually take me to do and timing it? And then I'm being like,
Mhm.
I spent more time finding a podcast to listen to than it took to unload the dishwasher.
That's exactly it. And I actually, so I live in an apartment that doesn't have a dishwasher. I did just buy a countertop dishwasher because I just decided it would be easier. But I tend to get the dishes done if I have no time to do them. Like
Mm.
it'll truly be like me thinking, what are the chances I can get them done in the 10 minutes before I really need to run out the door? Sometimes I end up making myself 5 minutes running out the door because time blindness and all of that. But yeah, pretty much. And the only other time I tend to do the dishes is right before I'm about to go to bed because I've read so many things that say if you wake up in the morning and there's something that has to be done, like a sink full of dirty dishes, it sort of throws your day off because you're just like, oh, wow, that's one more thing I have to do. Whereas if you wake up in a clean house, you're gonna feel like I can start my day the way it should start. Um, but it's almost always that deadline oriented thing where
Yeah.
I'm like, how fast can I get this done? Yeah.
Yeah. Although sometimes I do the opposite where I'm like, I'll leave it for the next day to be like, this is where like, I know this is going to be a day where
You
I'm
know.
doing chores. I can
Mhm.
start like the dishes are such a straightforward chore that I can just be like, okay, put on the podcast, start putting the dishes in, then go do some vacuuming, and like it gets
Yeah,
the
you're like, I'm gonna get it done.
yeah, it's like the little task that I know I can do that gets the ball rolling.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, oh shoot, did I just yeah, no, there you are. Okay. Sorry, I decided to close all the other windows on my computer because I was just like, does that slow the internet speed at all? Sorry, now I'm going off.
Yeah, it's one of those things I'm like, oh, I had this thought and I cannot not do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, okay. Anyway, here I am.
Yeah. There'll be times where I'm like, oh, I should look this thing up on my screen, and I'll like pop open my thing and I'm like, oh, am I like making my screen like flash lights on me because I'm going from dark to light over and over again? And I'm like, I'm trying to pay attention, but I also just want to look up this one thing.
But we're so good at doing multiple things at once, right? Or thinking we are.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the point too, is that we think we are, and then like
Hmm.
my kids do that all the time where they're like, I'm just listening, and I'm like, no, we have to pause the TV while we're talking to you. You cannot do both. You think you can, but
Yeah,
we've been
you
talking
think you
for
can.
5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I'll always remember, even growing up, my mom would always say that in college, her professors would get upset with her because she was knitting while listening to their lecture. And she had to keep saying to them, I actually listen, I'll actually understand what you're talking about more if I'm doing something like this with my hand and I'm sitting here with a fidget thing in my hand as I'm talking about this. But yeah, I think it's such a common thing that we all think. I have no idea if it's true. I don't know if she retained things better. She graduated college a year early because she didn't want to pay for a fourth year. So she must have been retaining a lot. But anyway, yeah, we all definitely have
Yeah,
that
I mean, I
kind
do
of
think the fidget aspect, it does help with concentration. With like, oh, it gives me I have just a little bit more stimulation while I'm doing whatever I'm doing, like listening or usually listening because it's. But having that little extra stimulation and then I'm focused on that thing, it's
hmm
I think related to the default mode network and how we like turn
hmm
our brain doesn't really turn off be that while we're trying to do tasks.
I love that you just mentioned the default mode network because I love talking about it. And when I read about it, so many things clicked for me. And I was like, task positive network, default mode network. But it's sort of a level of nuance in the science that a lot of conversations don't have the time or space for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of when I see people, for me, I first read about it in ADHD 2.0.
Mhm.
And when I mention that, or when I start talking about the default mode network and the DMN and the TPN, I see people start to glaze over. And that's when I'm like, oh, I've gone into my science speak. I should stop now.
Yeah.
But I thought all of that stuff was brilliant. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think it's like the science isn't quite there yet because I mean, it's very hard to say how that interacts. But I'm like, when I read about it, I'm
Mhm.
like, this is a key issue. Like, if I like even for like going to sleep, I'm like, oh, I don't have enough stimulation while I'm just lying there trying to fall asleep, and so that my brain is like going hyper mode and I can't fall asleep because it's doing that. I'm like, how can I like make stimulation to go to sleep? I'm like, well, if weighted blanket does that, and people like listen to
Mhm.
podcasts, and so I can't quite listen to something to go to sleep. That's a little bit too much, but so I'm still
Mhm.
working on that one.
I've really come to love there's an app where there's things you can pay for on it, but the majority of it is free and it's called Insight Timer and it's a meditation app, but they have such an incredible library of sleep. Some of them are sleep stories and it's like just like I've seen a lot of recommendations with ADHD to listen to music at a certain like beat per minute.
Hmm.
In the same sense, like all of these sleep stories or sleep meditations are the cadence of the voice or the cadence of the music is specific to get to help you fall asleep and they work for me. It's like it's not interesting enough that I'm going to tune into that instead of falling asleep, but it's not boring enough that I'm recognizing that I'm bored, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. And
Yeah.
it's been yeah, and they're almost all free and or that it's like you have the option to donate um to people towards the end of them like if you want to after you've finished, which usually means when I wake up in the morning and the app is there because I fell asleep during it. um but it's anyway, highly recommend Insight Timer.
Yeah. For my kids, I have the Moshi stories that they listen to go to sleep like every night. And it's been, I
Hmm.
was like, oh, them having like this like weird sing-songy story they listen to go to sleep. And it like just puts them right out. Like it's like just right level of stimulation for them. And
Hmm.
but
It's
like
like
this,
hypnosis,
yeah.
probably,
And
right?
kids, and
Yeah.
like, those are weird stories, but that's fine. Doesn't still need to make sense.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like the one I always like comes like think about is that one where like the mayor has outlawed sleep, and so they have a sleep easy that they have to like go and like catch some Z's, like it's a bootleg sleep or a bootlegger sleep place. It's like
Oh, I love
what?
the creativity in that.
Yeah, I'm like,
Um,
this is
yep.
so strange.
I also, I was gonna say on the like DMN and the uh default mode network and
Mm,
test positive network, I went a little bit deeper than what I had read in ADHD like books
mm,
and found there's a book that goes, I think it's from 2010 called Connectomes, and it's the scientist at MIT who doctors John Rady and Ned Hollowell speak to when they're writing about DMN and TPN in ADHD 2.0. And it's an entire book on the science of connectomes. And it's interesting because it's kind of written by the guy who figured all of that out. Um, and it's fascinating to me that 15 years later we have it. I'm pretty sure the book's from 2010. I haven't seen much more on it,
mm.
but I'm wondering when, in the same sense that the first time someone really used the word neurodiversity was like 1998, but it wasn't until about 2010 that it was popularized.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, when's the moment? When are connectomes going to be what we all talk about? And it's like the connect, like he talks about connectomes being, the neurological version of the genome, and he puts it into all these terms that make so much sense to me. I had the book's, it's like, written for a science audience, but also a lay person. So I highly recommend that book too.
Yeah, I'll check that out because I think
Yeah.
it's one of those areas that's like going to take off because
It's gotta like,
it's like, oh, this
yeah,
explains so many aspects of ADHD. Like,
so many aspects of it and other potential neurodivergences that we don't talk about yet. Like it's
mm,
or that we haven't even necessarily named yet. Yeah. And we didn't talk about the genome until I don't know what year we started the Human Genome Project, but in a similar vein, I think we'll see that happen with connectomes. It's just going to take time.
yeah. All right. Well, we should probably
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah.
But I mean, anyone that's been listening to my show has had I had a feed drop and some uh advertising from Understood, and um which was like something I was like, they're like, hey, we'll give you money to do this, and I'm like, really? Because I would love to do this anyway. This is a fantastic show. um so I was like, this is a win-win for me. uh but
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
you have this show, Climbing the Walls, that's investigative style. I kind of sometimes describe it like, people for more layman, like kind of like a serial like style podcast that's exploring a single year question of like why women have been kind of overlooked in the ADHD sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things where you're like, you like, I was really interested in the investigation where you're like, yeah, this is both true and not true. Which is because it's like, oh yeah, it's like the typical explanation is like, oh, we just didn't know women got ADHD, but you're like, yeah, but I met women in the 70s that got it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like because I heard that and I honestly sort of accepted it for the first year. I was diagnosed in early 2022. And yeah, at first, like I was reading New York Times articles, I was reading Guardian articles in the Guardian, like all of these um really reputable media outlets that I really respect were reporting on how we haven't known. And then we haven't known how ADHD affects women, I should say. That's the complete sentence there.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then in the I want to say it was like fall of 2022, was having dinner with a friend who is also a woman with late diagnosed ADHD, and she said, "Have you read that book?" And it was funny because neither of us were talking about it because we were just out to dinner. Like we had met through mutual friends, but you could sort of like I had started doing enough research on ADHD that I was kind of noticing the cadence of our conversation was 100% two women with ADHD. And she was about to leave for about 6 months of traveling and just like kind of the way we both live our lives. Also, I finally came out and said it. It's like, "Do you have ADHD?" Because I just found out a few months ago that I have it. And she's like, "Oh my God, I do." And then when we started talking about that, she said, "Have you read this book? You have to read this book." And the book was actually a workbook by Sari Solden and Michelle Frank, and it's called The Radical Guide to Women with ADHD. And as I started reading it, I was like, this is the first thing that's ever accurately captured, like, I would say the emotional experience of ADHD that now knowing I had it, it just helped me realize so many more aspects of ADHD. And I looked at when it was published, and it was published, Sari Solden's first books were published in the 90s. And I was like, but I've been hearing for 6 or 7 months that we just didn't understand how it affects girls. And when I was in elementary school in the 90s, no girls, I did not know of any girls being diagnosed. And I was sort of like, that was the first moment for me when, like you said, when I was like, wait a minute, this like very commonly accepted answer is not true.
Mhm.
We've known about it for 30 years. I just don't think we've listened to the women who were telling us what they knew.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
because it's such an acceptable answer, it's like sometimes I'll be like writing something and I'll be like, oh, I just need to cite this. And I'll like, where there is nothing to cite. How is this accept common wisdom?
Right. And it's wild because even with that narrative, there are now all of these almost you could say primary sources to cite. But I'm like, but what are they citing? And they're not citing anything. They're just talking about history as fact like when it turns out that those aren't all the facts. It wasn't accepted by the medical schools, so it wasn't part of the medical conversation, but that doesn't mean it wasn't known. Um, yeah, so that's sort of the premise of where the podcast starts. And then it's me saying, yeah, like why women, why now? Like if we have, so once you realize that
Yeah.
we've known this, it's like, wait, but then why is this the moment? Like, why is this the moment out of knowing for the last 30 years? Why was 2020 when we finally started seeing a tremendous rise in the diagnosis of adult women, sort of all at once? Because it's like this information's been there for someone to look at for 30 years, but now we're finally looking at it.
Yeah. And then yeah, through the uh series of the podcast, you do like, hey, it's not one thing either, because it's uh this groundswell of social media, like especially TikTok, and because I know I was on TikTok a lot during the pandemic and I saw a ton of ADHD content. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but also, yeah, I mean, as we at the start of the show, what we were talking about with the role of women playing uh, the support system and them like having their own support system knocked out from underneath them, because now they're like, oh, now I'm also homeschooling my kids and I'm uh,
Yeah.
out
Yeah,
like do have so much other stuff to do that I cannot handle this anymore.
exactly. And it's like there's been a generational shift or generational change for women, but the ADHD hasn't gone away. So it's like it it stays with us, and however women are living their lives in whatever decade, we're realizing that it's going to affect you in different ways, but it's still there. Ultimately, there's this underlying ADHD. Um, yeah, and it continues on to, it's like this confluence of factors that kind of all happen at once, but it's like the spread of information through social media. It's also like the pandemic had a huge role to play in it because the title of the podcast comes from something that a clinician said to me that she was receiving more emails during the pandemic than she had ever before. And these were emails from women who were seeking help with ADHD because they were, quote, climbing the walls. And and I think that's like you could almost look at that in two ways. For some women with ADHD, it was because they were extremely bored in climbing the walls. For other women with ADHD, it was because they were extremely overstimulated and
Mhm.
all of the structures they had put in place for themselves were wiped out. I mean, they were all wiped out from under us, and same for men, but it was like everything we knew about how to live our lives was no longer really accessible. If you were a
Mhm.
parent, you couldn't send your kids to school. You were trying to work at home while parenting at home all day. Like there were just so many things that were
Yeah.
just like ripped out from under people. Um, so yeah, I think everyone was climbing the walls in their own way, and I love that title because it's like open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was definitely something when I heard it, I was like, oh, yeah, I get that. Like, this
Mhm.
is uh both, yeah, the sensory aspect of like, oh, I need to get out, and the aspect of like the lack of sensory, I need to get
Yeah.
out.
This can't be it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, yeah,
And I
because
think one other oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's this.
I was just gonna say, like, one other thing with the podcast too is that so it's 6 episodes, and at a certain point, I address questions that I hear over and over, and it's sort of like I didn't get into how many times I've seen this historically, but when you look back at any even micro rise in the diagnosis of ADHD, you will find a debate over overdiagnosis, right? Like
Mhm.
that comes up no matter what segment of the population is being diagnosed with ADHD. If diagnosis is on the rise, there is going to be a debate over overdiagnosis. And I I get into that with this one, and then I sort of I'm going to give away one of the episodes, but I sort of landed a place of what does it matter? This is a
Yeah.
tremendous number of people asking for help. And it does matter in the sense of there's a massive shortage of medication available. So it matters because there are a lot of people who need the medication. And if there's overdiagnosis, I understand that. That is a huge issue. But ultimately, I think anyone who's seeking help and seeking a diagnosis for ADHD is struggling in some way. And if the approach to ADHD is what helps them, whether or not they have quote unquote like true ADHD, it's like overdiagnosis isn't necessarily the thing we should be arguing over. It's what are we doing for people? How are we making life manageable and helping people hack their ADHD?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that they can, yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to say like do get through life better. I'm like so that they can enjoy all of the things and be their full self. I don't know how
Yeah.
to word that perfectly,
Just
but
thrive without, or just not get rid of the struggle part of living.
get rid of the struggle part. Exactly. Like not just be in survival mode, I
Yeah.
think, so that they can just actually live. I think is the yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because one of the things I've tried to advocate for is like, if you are struggling, it's not because you are fundamentally broken as a person. You are just
Mhm.
not getting the support you need. You don't, there's something underlying that can be addressed to make it so that
Mhm.
you don't have to struggle so much. And sometimes it's,
Right.
as easy as like, oh, I know I have ADHD and I need to approach things differently. Sometimes there's, financial struggles and other things that, there are that they're a lot more complicated to fix. But
Mhm.
if you can find that underlying factor of what's causing the struggle, it makes it a lot easier to deal with the struggle.
It makes it so much easier to approach the struggle rather than kind of spinning on what is causing it. You can, yeah, what can I do about it? Like when you can move on to that question of what can I do about it, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I know so many people that are like were late diagnosed have just been like, "Oh, I'm just fundamentally broken as a person.
Mhm.
That's why things are hard." Like this isn't about ADHD. This is about the fact that I'm just lazy and can't do anything.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you can get past that and be like, "Okay, this is ADHD and there are things I can do." Like there's, you know, medication approaches, and there's also like behavioral changes and all sorts of things that you can do, and it's like, oh, okay, this is manageable
Mhm.
at least.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's such a common feeling, right? Like when I was first diagnosed, I'm a science journalist. I would like to think that I was diagnosed, I immediately understood that there would be ways to approach it
Mhm.
and manage it. And instead, my reaction to being diagnosed was, oh, that's why I've struggled in relationships and why I'll never be in a healthy one. And
Mhm.
like it immediately, it was like, oh, and finding this out at 30, I think I found out 2 months before I turned 37. It was like, well, would have been nice to know or to learn sooner, but you go through it, and I'll say this because maybe it's relatable to other late diagnosed women, but I remember having this feeling of like, it would have been nice to know when I was at an age where dating was easier. but it's already hard enough to date in your late 30s as a woman or as anyone. And now I'm learning this. I was like, cool, like, I'll just give up on that. And that's such a sad, like, I'm so sad in hindsight that I reacted that way, but it truly did take me about 6 or 7 months to embrace the idea that I just had to, learn to do things the way that works for my brain. And yes, it would have been nice to know in my 20s or early 30s when there maybe are more dating options. But it was just one of those things where you're like, it doesn't mean I'm broken and it doesn't mean I'm fundamentally unattractive or undateable. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of just like, okay, it means I have to learn. And I think actually the thing for me that really helped me decide to embrace figuring out what it means to have ADHD and how to hack it was that I knew I wanted to be a parent. And that timeline was sort of
Mm.
I was approaching a deadline. So it was like, okay, you have to figure this out and you have to figure it out in a constructive way. And that was sort of helpful for me. But I can completely relate to anyone who has this feeling of I'm fundamentally broken and I guess I'm not going to be able to fix it because it's actually my brain. It's not just a circumstance. But yeah, podcasts like this and books like ADHD 2.0 and books that do, I think for me, it helped to hear to really think through the ways that ADHD, there's a moment in the podcast where I get into this, but I was at my sister's wedding and I sort of had a moment where I was like, wait, I don't think I want all the things that people traditionally want.
Mhm.
And I think I'm actually happy that I haven't wanted it because it's the reason why I've done a lot of the things I have done that don't make sense to other people. And it was sort of like a starting to appreciate my brain that helped put me on the path to, oh, I could parent differently. I don't have to try and figure this out so that I can fit in with all the other parents. Um, but yeah, it took time, and all of that is to just say I can relate to that feeling. But I also hope that if people are feeling that at all, they continue to try to power through it and look for things that'll help them realize that they are not fundamentally broken. We're just all different.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to have that knowledge that, yeah, even if with that diagnosis, there is a lot of people have this like sense of relief of like, oh, this explains so much because no one is going into their diagnosis being like, oh my God, I had no idea at all. I thought I was doing amazing. It's usually like, oh, I was struggling and that explains a lot. And I,
Yeah.
all of my childhood makes sense now. Uh,
hmm I think, and if they have I had no idea, it's in relation to, oh, that's ADHD.
yeah.
That's the thing that I've had. It's like they're very aware of the ways they've felt different and the ways that
Mhm.
they've struggled. And um, but yeah, there's that's what that was. Yeah, like yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. And then, so they have that kind of like relief of like, oh, I know this makes sense. But then there's also this like, a lot of people have a lot of grief around who they could have been. They have a lot of anger about why they weren't diagnosed earlier, why they have to deal with this, because it feels very unfair at times where I'm just like, I really wish I didn't have to deal with a lot of this. Uh,
Yeah. It would be so much easier to not have to deal with. Yeah.
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 And it's, a lot to go, a lot of emotional processing to do, and it's not going to happen real quick.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, patience isn't always
Not a common
immediately
ADHD
available.
trait.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like you can read a million things and hear a million things that are like, be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself. And I'm like, can we just figure this out already? Like it's just, but it's a constant learning process.
Yeah, and it like, I almost have 2 decades of diagnosis, and there's still times where I'm just like, why am I like this? And I'm like, oh, it's the ADHD. Write that
hmm
down. That's
Yeah,
why I
exactly.
forgot to do this, and my car is a mess, and all these things, and I'm like, ADHD. Okay,
Yep.
still need to remember that one.
Still need to do it. I just
Yeah,
can remember why. Yeah, why I forgot to do it. Yeah.
yeah.
Even like little things like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But
You go.
no, as I lost it. We'll go for it.
Sorry. I was just gonna say even little things like I had a doctor's appointment this morning and I have really, really since the I wouldn't say since the diagnosis, since deciding to embrace and like figure out what are the lifestyle things I need to figure out.
Mhm.
Like at the doctor's office, I was scheduling a follow-up and it was like in my calendar, like the calendar invite was going in. And the nurse kept, or the woman helping, the receptionist kept saying, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be in the portal." And I was like, "Nope, it's going to be in my calendar right now." Because if I have to go to a portal to look up the date, I won't do that until after the date, and then I will have missed my appointment. But I've just started to be much more vigilant about those things and tried to make them muscle memory, that it's like if someone's suggesting we do something, I'm talking to them with the calendar invite open and I'm typing it in as we say it,
Yeah.
because the chances of me going back to the other thing to look at what plan we made,
Yeah. Or to
there
make sure
isn't a
that
chance.
I'm not forgetting something else that's on my calendar there. They're like, "Oh, we should do this on Wednesday." And
Exactly.
I'm like, "Yes, we should." And oh, I cannot.
And I can exactly. And it's like I freelance, so I have it seems like in the last year and a half, every company I work with wants me to have an email address for that company.
Hmm.
But then things will pop up and they're like, "Oh, I did send you a calendar invite." And I'm like, "Yeah, but every email address comes with its own calendar." And there's like moments where I'm like, I just need tech support. I need personal tech support, like someone to make all the calendars show up on the same Google Calendar so that it's just easy. And I think I've slowly figured it all out, um but yeah, so even remembering calendar invites doesn't always
Yeah,
it's
just
always makes sense.
managing my like family calendar. Like sometimes we're just like, my wife is like, "Oh yeah, well this is all fine," and then I'm like, "No, I have something on Saturday." And she's like, "Oh, yours was just turned off for some reason, so I didn't."
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and then uh to also spoil the sixth
Hmm.
episode, I think is a really good
Hmm.
place to go from here. Is that like we have all these changes, especially with women with hormones and things, which is from my perspective, I'm like, why isn't
Hmm.
this not being explored? And then I'm like, oh, then like reading about, I'm like, oh, because scientists are dumb. Not dumb, but it's yeah, it's
Yeah, but
one of those things where I'm
stuck
like,
in a system. Yeah.
yeah. I have a friend that does biomathematics for figuring out medication dosages and stuff, and I'm like, one, you're much smarter than me. I don't have any idea how you can do that. But also like it's really hard. And he's like, yeah, it's when we start adding in the hormone things, like it, I
It's
have
hard.
to do
It's
a
really
lot more.
hard. Yeah, and for a long time there wasn't a willingness to do a lot more, right? Like there was I episode 6 was it was really interesting because I realized that in 20 years of reporting, it was the first time I was trying to report on the absence of research
Hmm.
as opposed to here's the new research that's worth paying attention to. And you know, I ultimately did find people who are beginning to look at this, and I think some of the things that we don't talk about directly in the episode, or like why is some of this now, like why are female hormones and ADHD starting to be studied? Well, some of that has to do with the fact that we have finally created enough pathways for women to become the scientists conducting the research,
Hmm.
right? And it's like for a long time this research wasn't done for all sorts of reasons. Women weren't the ones who were the scientists. And so that was just like one element of it all that I love talking about. But yeah, the hormone aspect was tough. And this actually, I was at dinner with a few friends of friends in late 2022, maybe late 2023. Yeah, it might have actually been like December 2023. And someone at the party mentioned that she only recently realized she has ADHD, but she's like 8 years younger than me, and I'm
Hmm.
40. There seems to be a cutoff. Women like in their mid to younger 30s seem to have had the access to diagnosis more so than women my exact age. And she had been diagnosed when she was 8, but thought that the doctor was dumb and refused to take any diagnosis seriously. And then she had gone on hormone-based birth control when she was 16, and around 32 she had gone off of it and all of a sudden had all of these symptoms that she didn't understand. Like she was having all these issues that made no sense to her. And she and her doctor narrowed it down and realized the only difference was she had gone off of birth control.
Mhm.
And so I became really fascinated with hormones and ADHD because of her sort of backwards recognition that when she went off of birth control, hormone-based birth control, they recognized her ADHD for the first time since she had gone on hormone-based birth control when she was 16. And her doctor said, I can't medically prove this, but I think the hormone-based birth control was masking all of your ADHD symptoms. And talking to her, we were very close to uh she was going to be interviewed for the show, but our schedules just didn't align.
Mhm.
But I think that's fascinating. And I think that's something that there's research being done in Sweden that's looking at different hormone-based birth controls and what impact they have on women with ADHD. But it's going to be a very long time before we really know the answers because um, every woman's hormones are different.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have time to test. I mean, they'll eventually do the research, but the research is going to have to look at differences in hormone levels for different women at different points in their cycle and then different medication options. It's going to be a long time. But what we do know at this point, I think I'm willing to say that, yeah, hormone-based birth control should be considered in the treatment of ADHD, or not birth control, hormone-based treatments is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. Birth out, like nothing to do with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. The birth
Yeah.
control is just, it's hormone based itself. So,
It's how women tend to access hormone-based treatments. Yeah.
but yeah, I can absolutely, because, and it's like wild to think that we never considered hormones because it's like that has such a huge impact on how we process medications.
Hmm.
Because I've heard from like many women that are like, yeah, I need to take more medication when I'm going through my cycle. Dog is digging somewhere in my office. I'm like, there's nowhere to dig. Stop. But yeah, their cycle changes how their symptoms work and how their medication is affected. I mean, this goes
Yeah.
well beyond just ADHD medication. That's like
Oh yeah, no,
all
this
medications.
it affects how our brains work. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just completely. And some of the studies on whether you're looking at ADHD brains or not, the studies that they're now doing on differences in behavior and the data that we now have to put behind it, because this is all stuff that women have been anecdotally reporting as long as women have existed. But it wasn't until the 90s that scientists even started including women in most scientific studies. And it was fun to get into some of that history in the
Mm.
last episode because I think it's stuff I didn't know until I was doing a master's in science journalism. And then I try to throw some of that history into any story I can because I don't think it's common knowledge that women just weren't included in scientific studies until the 90s. Like it still blows my mind when I say it out loud.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
is some of the like science that they do for women's stuff, I'm just like, that's that's not science. Like that's
Yeah.
he's like, oh yeah, we just extrapolated. I'm like, clear, like that you can't do that.
Yeah, and you can't just extrapolate. And it's I mean it's amazing too because when you look at what was done in the 90s, that's they looked at one of the first major studies conducted with women was on the long-term effects of hormone-based treatments post-menopause.
Mhm.
And women had been taking estrogen as a treatment post-menopause since the 50s. And it wasn't until they studied it in the 90s that they discovered that it increases cancer risk if you continue that for 5 years post-menopause. So for more than 40 years, women had been doing this regularly. And until someone decided to study it, we didn't know that the cutoff should be 5 years. So I'm sort of like, yeah, we should be we should be studying how hormones could be used in the treatment of ADHD and many other things, but we should also be studying the risks like that because it could turn out it I personally think it's unlikely, but who am I to say? Um, but it could turn out that the risks outweigh the rewards. I don't know. We don't know until someone bothers to study it and funds the studies. Yeah.
Yeah. And for men who are listening are like, I don't care about this. You should. You also have hormones that are
You
affected.
should.
So
Yeah. We
and
live in
also,
a world with women who are
yeah,
affected.
you live
Yeah.
with women and you want them to have a good life too.
Yeah,
At least
exactly.
I do, and I suspect most
Thank you.
people do.
Yeah.
My wife has been watching the Handmaid's Tale, so it's maybe
Mhm.
maybe not all men, but I
Yeah,
expect most want to have women in living,
I think so.
because I have had undiagnosed ADHD that was a terrible time, and I do not wish that on anyone.
Yeah, how could you? It's like you have empathy. In ADHD 2.0, they described one of the symptoms or the traits of ADHD as exquisite empathy. And I loved that description because I'm like, I do think. But anyway, I'm sure you can empathize.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like you don't want like it is ADHD is. I mean, this is why I often have trouble with like describing it as a superpower. Is I often go, well, this is tough. This is like it is not fun to go through
hmm,
a lot of things with ADHD, and it is something where I feel like we don't uh we don't give accommodations for superpowers.
right.
And we
Yeah,
clearly need a lot of accommodations. I mean, I'm sure there's like some very nerdy people like, what about Cyclops? He needs to wear glasses. I'm like, yeah, he's shooting force beams out of his eyes. They're blowing things up. That's not the level of superpower we're talking about here.
yeah.
But yeah, it is a disability, but it's not. I go back and forth. 'Cause I'm like, yes, disability, 100%, not 100% bad, but
Right,
uh,
not 100% debilitating, I
yeah,
would say.
that's and
Yeah,
no anyone within the disability community would not describe any of their disabilities as
exactly.
like they're like, no, this is I just have to like live differently and do things in
Yeah,
my own.
and I think some of us might struggle with the which is it because ADHD comes with a lot of black and white thinking from everything I've read. And I'm sort of like, I try really hard to lean into the gray areas because I'm like, it can be both. There are aspects of my life in which ADHD feels like a strength, and there are many aspects in which it does not. And it feels like a weakness compared to the general population. Um, yeah, so I sort of landed in a middle place where I'm just like, this is just a way my brain works. I don't know. Like it's
And I
just
think
that's
that's a
just
great
what
way
it
to think
is.
about it.
Yeah.
Because it is, yeah, it is what it is, and I have to live with it like that. And it's not like I can just genie my thing away and that.
Exactly. You're not just gonna
Yeah.
it's not going.
And
Yeah.
even if I did, that wouldn't solve all the problems in my life with things I have to deal with.
Exactly. Right.
Boring
Right.
tasks are still going to be boring, and
It's still gonna be boring. It's still gonna be so boring.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can try and gamify them or do whatever I want to do to them, but they're still
Yeah.
it's some things are just boring. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're coming up here on time, so I was wondering if there
Right.
are any final thoughts you wanted to leave the audience with.
One of the best things that has helped me with my ADHD is I was sort of always a like some of my friends say I'm an amazing yes woman. They're like, you just say like you'll always do it. You'll always do it. And when I really started taking my ADHD seriously, I did what I called a life audit. And I just started tracking how many nights in a row have I done something. And I live in Brooklyn. It's very easy to do something every night of the week. And there was a point when for 17 days straight, I had done one or two or three things every day beyond work and working out and all of the things that we should, try and do on a daily basis. And I was completely burnt out and I tracked it. It took me 4 days to feel recovered enough to do stuff again. And then I started tracking, well, what if on like the 10th day, I always mark off a day off? And I started figuring out exactly how many days I could do things before I would need 3 days to recover or 2 days or one day. And when I got it down to, okay, with one day by myself, I can go back to doing whatever I want. And I just started scheduling, I wouldn't call them off days, but I just started, and I think you see this all over ADHD advice, but it took that life audit for me to figure out where is burnout happening. And then how can I put calendar invites to myself to hang out with myself
Yeah.
and actually take them seriously and not deprioritize them just because it was only for myself. So I think that's my final thought is just figure that out for yourself. Like what is the time you need to recharge and take that as seriously as you take everything else.
Yeah. The intentionality of life.
Intentionality of life. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the
Yeah.
podcast is Climbing the Walls. It can be found wherever people listen to podcasts, same app that you listen to this one on. And if people want to find out more beyond just climbing the walls, where should they go?
Understood.org that's who we made Climbing the Wall. That's where Climbing the Walls was made. And it just has a tremendous number of resources for all things ADHD, whether you're a person recently diagnosed with ADHD, you're a parent parenting someone with ADHD, you have coworkers with ADHD, whatever your relationship to ADHD is, understood.org is what I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a great time. I'm sure people will get a lot out of this, especially if they have questions about, the experiences of being ADHD and being a woman, which is, despite everything that's been going on, still needs a lot more representation.
A lot more representation and a lot more funding. I guess that's the one other thing I would say. If you're in a position to fund research, who knows? If you happen to be listening to this show, yeah, like more research on women and ADHD. That's what we need. But thank you for having me on.
Thanks again to Danielle for coming on the show, and thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. Before you go, though, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. Instead of guessing when you've overbooked yourself, start tracking it like an experiment. For a few weeks, note each day when you have a social, professional, or mentally demanding activity beyond your baseline. Then try to figure out how many consecutive on days it takes before you feel fried. 2. Downtime doesn't magically appear and needs to be scheduled on your calendar, or it often just gets eaten by other people's needs or whatever's loudest in the moment. If someone asks you to do something during that block, you can truthfully say that you already have something scheduled. Treating self-care time as a legitimate appointment protects it from getting deprioritized just because it's only for you. 3. A common ADHD trap is overestimating how awful or time-consuming a task will be, which makes it easier to avoid it. Try timing your task to give yourself actual data to challenge your brain's "this will take forever" narrative and turn a dreaded job into something you can knock out in maybe just a couple of minutes. 4. Consider hormonal factors when tracking ADHD symptoms, as hormones have a big influence on your ADHD symptoms, yet are often overlooked. Hormonal changes can affect focus, energy, mood, and even how well ADHD medication works. Tracking your symptoms alongside your cycle or other hormonal shifts can help you spot patterns and help you adjust strategies accordingly. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingYourADHD.com/contact. And if you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingYourADHD.com/241. And if you'd like even more Hacking Your ADHD, be sure to sign up for my newsletter, Any and All Distractions, which comes out every other week. In it, I give out my best distractions for the week, be they what I'm reading, what I'm playing, or what I'm watching. I also try to give out a few bits of actionable advice in each newsletter, although your mileage is certainly going to vary there. If that sounds like something you're interested in, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/newsletter to sign up. And I also wanted to make sure you know about the Hacking Your ADHD Patreon, which you can find at hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon. It's a pay what you want model, meaning that you get access to everything, regardless of how much you pay. 0, 2, 10, whatever you feel comfortable giving, or not. You get access to all the same stuff, including the Hacking Your ADHD Discord. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon to sign up. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@hackingYourADHD. And finally, if you'd like another way to support the show, the best way to do so is to tell someone about the show, especially if you think a particular episode would resonate with them. Just click the share button on your podcast player. And now for your moment of dad. I was at an invention competition and tried making a pencil with 2 erasers, but I guess it was kind of pointless.